Welcome back everyone. In this tutorial, let's try to learn about variables in Python. In Python, variable is simply a name that refers to an object stored in computer's memory. We are already familiar with this term variable, especially when we solve math problems. We use some variables like x and y as names given to some values like x is equal to 10 or y is equal to 20, etc. Now, when it comes to Python programs, there is something that happens in our machine when we execute our programs, right? So let's try to understand what happens when we create a variable in Python program. The way we can create a variable in Python is very simple. We can simply specify a variable name like age in this case, and we can simply assign a value to it. Now we know that in Python, all the data values are stored in the form of objects. So basically when Python interpreter executes this instruction, what it does is it will create an integer object in memory at some memory address, let's say 140.148.150 with this value 25. This is just a random memory address I've taken. It could be any address in memory. Now once this integer object is created in memory, it will make this variable age a reference to this integer object 25. Many people assume that variable is a container which stores this value, but this is not correct when it comes to Python. If you assume it this way, it will cause a lot of confusion when you learn advanced concepts. So always remember, variable is only a reference to the object. You can think of it this way. There is something called namespace, which is like a map in which there is a mapping between the variable name and the memory address where the object is stored. Now, whenever we use this variable in our program, Python interpreter will take the address from that mapping, which is between variable name and the address of the object, and goes and fetches this object. And that's how when we use this variable age, it will fetch this integer object 25 and it will give it to the print function. And now print function will print the value of this object 25. So I hope now you understood why we call variable as a reference of an object in Python. Understanding this is really crucial to learn advanced concepts. Now what is the use of variables? We basically create variables to store the data temporarily so that we can access the data whenever required using the variable names. Let's see a small demonstration to understand what this means. So in our PyCharm project, let me create a new Python file. Let me call it simply as variables. So it has created variables.py. Now let's say we are writing a program in which we are going to use the details of a student. So we can create some variables for student data. Let's say name, and let's give a name Sachin. So this is a string. So whenever we write strings, we have to enclose it in single quotes or double quotes. In the same way, I've created variables for other data like roll number of the student, let's say 101. Also, let's say the student has written an exam with 3 subjects and these are the scores received by the student in each of these subjects. So I've created 3 variables, score 1, score 2, score 3. And I have assigned the respective scores to these variables 60, 80 and 70. Now we can simply access this data by using these variables. Let's say I just want to simply print the name of the student. I can use print function. Till now we have seen how we can print a single value using print function, but we can also print multiple values. For example, here I'm trying to print this string name and colon. And I am also printing this variable name. And I am separating both these using comma. Now if you try to execute this program, right click, run variables, it will print name colon and space Sachin. So this kind of syntax is really helpful when you want to print some value and you also want to add some description in the beginning, right? So this will help us understand the output easily. All you need to do is you can specify a description string and put a comma, and here you can write variable or any expression. Then it will print both of them with a space separation. Not only two, we can even add more expressions as well. Now, not only that, we can even perform some operations using these variables. For example, let's say I want to find the total marks achieved by the student. I can create another variable like total, and I can add all these scores this way. As you can see here, I'm creating a variable total and I'm assigning the sum of all these scores to this variable. So 60 plus 80 plus 70, which is equal to 210, will be assigned to this variable total. Now, if you remember from the previous lecture, even the value evaluated by this expression will also be stored in the form of an object. So when Python interpreter executes this instruction, it will create an integer object with value 210, and it will make this variable total a reference to this integer object 210. That's what happens behind the scenes. So in this way, once we create these variables, we can access this data using these variable names whenever required in the program. Now let me also simply print this total score. So I'm writing this description total score colon comma this variable total. Now if you execute this program, it will print the value 210. Now let's take another example. Let's say we want to build a very simple calculator. Now we want to perform the addition, subtraction, multiplication and division between these values. So what we can do is let's simply print addition and comma. Here let's write this expression a plus b. So this will print addition colon and the value of a plus b, which is 15. In the same way, we can also find out subtraction, multiplication and division between these two variables a and b. Now if you try to run this program, so as you can see, this is the output we got for these four statements, right? So it prints addition, a plus b will be 15. Similarly, subtraction will be 10 minus 5, 5, right? Multiplication is 10 star 5, which will be 50. And 10 divided by 5, it will be 2.0. So when you use single slash, it is called floating point division. So the result will always be a floating point value. So it will print the output as 2.0. Now what is the benefit of creating these variables a and b? If we don't create these variables, we might have to write these values 10 and 5 at all these different places, isn't it? Instead, what we did, we created two variables a and b with these values 10 and 5, and we simply reused these variables. Now let's say instead of 10 and 5, we want to use different values. Let's say 20 and 4. All you need to do is to change these values from 10 and 5 to 20 and 4. You don't have to go to all these locations and change the values. Also, one more thing we can do is, here we are printing a lot of things to the console, right? So what we can do is, here we can put a simple descriptive message in a print function saying simple calculator. By putting this, what happens if you try to run this program? By using this descriptive message, we can easily understand what is the output of the instructions below it. So try to use these kind of messages when you are printing a lot of things to the console. We also have comments, but comments will not be executed, right? So it will not print anything to the console. So we can use these kind of descriptive messages using print function when we are printing a lot of things in the console. Now once we create a variable, we can even reassign the variable to a new value. For example, here initially I am creating a variable a with a value 10. So what it does, it will create this integer object 10 in memory, and this variable a will refer to this integer object. So that's why when you print this value of a, it will fetch this integer object 10, and print function will print this value 10. Now let's say we want to change the value of variable a from 10 to 20. So we can simply reassign by writing a is equal to 20. And one very important point we need to understand here is that whenever we assign a new value to this variable a, it will not modify this existing object, which is integer 10. In fact, a new integer object 20 will be created, and variable a will refer to this new integer object 20. It will not impact the previous object, which is integer 10 whatsoever. It will simply refer to this new integer object 20. But this previous integer object 10 will still be there in the memory. In case if this object is not being referred anywhere else in the program, it will be deleted by a process called garbage collector, which runs in the background. Also, one more thing is that integer objects are immutable, which means once these integer objects are created, their values can't be modified. We will talk more about this when we discuss immutability concept. So simply remember, whenever we use this assignment in Python, it is just like saying, hey variable a, now go and refer to this new integer object 20. That's it. It will not make any changes to the previous object this variable was referring to. Now here when we try to print this variable a, it will fetch this integer object 20 here, and print function will print the value of this object, which is 20. Alright, let's see a small demo on reassignment. I've put a comment. I also put a descriptive message. Now here let's say I want to assign a value 10 to this variable a, and let's print this variable a. Now here let's reassign this to value 20. Now let's print this variable a again. Now if you try to run this program, so this is the output we got, this one. So initially we have assigned value 10 to this variable a, so it prints value 10. And when you assign 20, it now refers to new integer 20, so it prints value 20. Now one major difference between Python and other programming languages like C, C++ and Java is that Python is a dynamically typed language, which means the data type of the variable is determined during runtime. Now let's compare a small code snippet in Java and Python to understand what this means. So in Java, this is how we create a variable. We will specify the data type of the variable and then the variable name, and we assign the value. Now this variable a is associated to this specific data type called int, which means we can only assign integer values to this variable. So when you try to reassign to a different value, which is integer 10, this will be totally fine. But when you try to assign a different data type value like a string or a float, this is not allowed in Java because this variable a is associated to the data type int. That's why we call C, C++ and Java as statically typed languages, which means we need to specify the data type of variables when we create them. But when it comes to Python, you might have observed that till now, whenever we create any variable, we did not specify any data type. So in Python, there is no need to specify the data type of the variable. In fact, the data type of the variable is determined during runtime. What does this mean? Let's say we have this code snippet. When Python interpreter executes this line, based on the value assigned to this variable a, it will understand the data type of this variable a. So here we have the value 5, which means it is an integer object. That's why the type of a will be int. So the type of the variable is nothing but the data type of the object assigned to it. Now let's say we reassign it to a different data type value, let's say a string. This is perfectly allowed in Python because in Python variable is not attached to any fixed data type. Now as we have assigned a string to this variable a, type of a will print class str, which means the data type of variable now is str. Now let's see this demo. Here I'm assigning a value 5 to this variable a, and here I'm trying to print a and type of a. When we write two different expressions separated by comma, both the values will be printed with a space separation. And now here I'm assigning a string hello to the same variable a. Now again I'm trying to print a and type of a. Let's try to run this program. So this is the output, right? So as you can see, initially when we assign 5, it prints 5 and class int, which means the data type is int. Now when we reassign it to a string hello, it will print hello and the type of a will be str. So it prints class str. I hope now you understood what do we mean by data type of variables. Alright, now we have different ways of assigning values to variables. Till now we have seen single assignment where we assign a value to variable in each instruction. And if we want, we can assign multiple values to variables at once like this. we can separate the variables and values with commas. Then this value will be assigned to this variable A. The second value is assigned to second variable B. The final value will be assigned to this third variable C. So let's add that example in this program. So we can separate variables A, comma, B, comma, C with commas, and we can also add values 10, comma, hello, comma, 6.5. Now let's print these variables A, comma, B, comma, C. We can write more than two expressions as well in this print function by separating with commas. All the values will be printed with space separation. Now if we run this program, so this is the output. So first it prints value of A, which is 10. Then it prints hello, which is the value of B. And finally it prints 6.5, which is the value of variable C. Not only that, we can even assign a same value to multiple variables at once. Let's say we want to assign a value 10 to all the variables A, B, and C. We can simply write A is equal to B is equal to C is equal to 10. So when this instruction is executed, what happens is an integer object 10 is created and all these variables refer to the same integer object 10. A is equal to B is equal to C is equal to 10. And now let me try to print A, comma, B, comma, C. And here if you observe, I am putting these spaces in between, right? This is not mandatory, but by putting these spaces, code will be much easily readable. So even here you can put some space after these commas. Alright, so this makes your code much easier to read. Alright, now if you try to run this program, so it prints 10, 10 and 10 because all these variables now refer to integer 10. With this, I hope you understood how variables work in Python. Now while creating these variables, we have to follow some rules on what names we can use. Let's discuss about those naming rules in the next video.